Hello and welcome to the Scroll of Uplift. Have you ever experienced something not working out the way you hoped, only to look back later and realize it may have been for the best? At the time, it didn't feel that way. At the time, it felt disappointing. It felt frustrating. It felt unfair. Maybe it was a job you didn't get. Maybe it was a relationship that ended. Maybe it was an opportunity that disappeared. Maybe it was a plan that fell apart despite your effort and good intentions. Whatever the situation was, you likely had a vision of how things were supposed to go. You had expectations. You had hopes. You believed you were moving toward something important. Then something changed. The outcome you wanted didn't happen, and suddenly, instead of moving forward, it felt like you had been pushed backward. Most people know what that feeling is like. Most people have experienced moments when life did not follow the plan they carefully imagined. The difficult part is that setbacks rarely announce themselves as useful experiences. When they happen, they usually feel like losses. They feel like evidence that something has gone wrong. They feel like proof that progress has stopped. And because of that, our first reaction is often resistance. We argue with reality. We replay events in our minds. We wonder what we could have done differently. We imagine alternate outcomes. We spend time wishing things had happened another way. This is a natural response. When something matters to you, disappointment is a normal part of being human. But there is another perspective worth considering. What if not every setback is simply a setback? What if some disappointments are actually preventing larger problems? What if some closed opportunities are helping you avoid situations that would not have been right for you? What if some of the things that feel like losses today are creating space for something better tomorrow? Your current perspective may not contain the full picture. When something happens that you did not want, you are seeing that event from the limited information available to you right now. You do not know what would have happened if things had gone differently. You do not know what challenges may have come with the opportunity you wanted. You do not know what problems may have emerged later. You do not know what future opportunities are still ahead of you. You only know what you can see in this moment. And sometimes that limited perspective can make a setback feel more final than it really is. Think about how often people look back on their lives and realize that certain disappointments changed their direction in important ways. This happens because perspective changes. What feels devastating in one moment can appear completely different when viewed through the lens of time. One of the biggest challenges during a setback is that it often affects your confidence. You start questioning yourself. You wonder whether you made mistakes. You wonder whether you are capable. You wonder whether you are good enough. You wonder whether you should stop trying. These thoughts are common, but they can also be misleading. A setback is an event. It is not an identity. A rejection is an outcome. It is not a definition of your worth. A disappointment is an experience. It is not proof that you are incapable. Sometimes people make the mistake of turning temporary circumstances into permanent conclusions. One opportunity doesn't work out, and they conclude they will never succeed. One relationship ends, and they conclude they will never find a meaningful connection. One goal takes longer than expected, and they conclude they are falling behind. But life is rarely that simple. You are not defined by what didn't work out. You are not defined by what ended. You are not defined by what went wrong. You are defined far more by how you respond. That response matters because every setback presents a choice. You can spend all your energy focusing on what was lost, or you can gradually begin asking, what can be learned? You can remain focused entirely on what did not happen, or you can begin exploring what remains possible. This shift is not always easy. In fact, it often takes time. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is allow yourself to feel disappointed before trying to find meaning in the experience. There is no prize for pretending something doesn't hurt. There is no benefit in forcing positivity before you are ready. Honesty matters. Acknowledging your emotions matters. Giving yourself space to process matters. But eventually there comes a point where healing requires movement. It requires looking ahead instead of only looking behind. It requires becoming curious about what comes next. One helpful question to ask yourself during difficult periods is this: what can I learn from this experience? Not because every setback contains a perfect lesson, but because every experience contains information. Perhaps you learned something about your priorities. Perhaps you learned something about your values. Perhaps you learned something about your strengths. Perhaps you learned something about the kind of environment where you do your best work. Perhaps you learned something about the relationships you want to build. Learning does not erase disappointment, but it can transform disappointment into growth. And growth has value. Another helpful question is, what am I assuming about this situation that may not be true? This question can be surprisingly powerful because setbacks often trigger assumptions. You assume you failed. You assume the opportunity was your only chance. You assume things will never improve. Yet many of these assumptions are based on fear rather than facts. The truth is that you cannot predict your future from one difficult moment. You cannot determine your long-term potential from one setback. You cannot accurately measure what opportunities may appear 6 months or a year from now. The future remains unwritten, and that means possibility still exists. This is where patience becomes important. Not passive patience, active patience. The kind of patience that allows you to continue learning, improving, and moving forward even when circumstances are not ideal. The kind of patience that reminds you that today's disappointment does not have to become tomorrow's limitation. Many people abandon goals immediately after experiencing setbacks, not because they lack ability, but because they mistake temporary difficulty for permanent defeat. Those are not the same thing. Difficulty is part of growth. Disappointment is part of growth. Uncertainty is part of growth. Every meaningful pursuit involves moments where things do not go according to plan. The key is learning how to remain steady during those moments. This does not mean forcing optimism. It means maintaining perspective. It means remembering that one event rarely tells the whole story. It means remembering that progress is rarely a straight line. It means remembering that setbacks often provide valuable information. Sometimes they reveal weaknesses that need attention. Sometimes they reveal goals that no longer align with who you are becoming. Sometimes They reveal opportunities to grow in ways you had not considered. And sometimes, they simply redirect your attention toward possibilities you had overlooked. There is strength in being able to adapt. There is strength in being able to adjust your plans without abandoning yourself. There is strength in being able to acknowledge disappointment while continuing to believe in your future. Because your future is larger than any single setback. Your future is larger than one rejection. It is larger than one mistake. It is larger than one failed attempt. It is larger than one difficult chapter. The challenge is remembering that when emotions are running high. When people feel disappointed, they often narrow their focus. They become consumed by the immediate problem. They stop noticing the possibilities that still exist around them. This is understandable, but it is also why perspective is so important. Perspective helps you remember that life continues. New opportunities continue to appear. New relationships continue to form. New skills continue to develop. New experiences continue to shape you. Nothing remains exactly the same forever, and that includes the difficult moments. The situation that feels overwhelming today will eventually become part of your history. The disappointment that feels so heavy right now will eventually lose some of its intensity. The setback that currently occupies so much of your attention will eventually become one experience among many. And when that happens, you may find yourself seeing things differently. You may discover that what felt like a dead end was actually a turning point. You may discover that what felt like rejection created room for something more aligned with your values. You may discover that what felt like failure taught you lessons that became incredibly valuable later. You may discover that what felt like a setback protected you from circumstances that would not have served you well. You cannot always know that in the moment, and that is okay. You do not need to have complete understanding today. You do not need to immediately find meaning in every challenge. You do not need to convince yourself that every disappointment is secretly positive. What you can do is remain open. Open to learning. Open to growth. Open to the possibility that your current perspective is incomplete. Open to the possibility that this experience may contribute to your future in ways you cannot yet see. That openness creates resilience. It helps you stay flexible. It helps you remain hopeful without becoming unrealistic. It helps you continue moving forward. And moving forward is what matters. Not perfectly, not quickly, just steadily. One thoughtful decision at a time. One lesson at a time. One day at a time. If you are facing a setback right now, remember this. Your disappointment is real. Your frustration is valid. Your feelings deserve acknowledgement. But this moment does not define you. This outcome does not define you. This experience is one part of your journey, not the entire story. Give yourself permission to feel what you feel. Give yourself permission to learn. Give yourself permission to adapt. Give yourself permission to keep going. Because sometimes what feels like a setback today becomes something you understand differently later. Sometimes what feels like rejection creates a new direction. Sometimes what feels like a loss creates new possibilities. And sometimes what feels like a setback might be protection. Thank you for sharing this moment of time with me today. If this scroll resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content. And before you go, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Can you think of a time in your life when something that felt disappointing at first eventually led you towards something better than you originally planned? Your life is moving. Your story is unfolding. Your next chapter is forming, and you are ready for it.